Let's start with a hard truth most people avoid. In today's relationship culture, you're told that communication is everything. That if you just say the right words, explain yourself well enough, or express your needs clearly, love will stay. But what if that's only half the story? What if always reaching out, always being the one to fix, to explain, to comfort, was actually making you less magnetic? Less powerful? There's a secret few talk about, one that doesn't show up in feel-good Instagram posts, or those mainstream dating books filled with soft advice. It's a technique that's been whispered in private circles, hidden behind layers of shame and fear of being misunderstood. And I'm going to say it plainly, silence, when used with intention, is more potent than any paragraph you could ever send. And not just any silence, controlled, calm, and unapologetic silence. A silence that doesn't plead, doesn't punish, and doesn't chase. A silence that turns you into a question mark in someone's soul. Now ask yourself, have you ever been so consistent, so giving, so emotionally available that someone started to take your presence for granted? Have you felt the slow shift, that painful slide where their texts got shorter, their interest faded, and you became the one trying harder? You weren't wrong for loving. But maybe you forgot the power of being missed. Maybe you forgot how much mystery fuels desire. And this is where the forbidden tool comes in, the trick they don't want you to know, because once you master it, the dynamic of any relationship changes. Forever. This isn't about manipulation. It's about mastery. It's not passive aggression. It's stoic clarity. The kind Marcus Aurelius himself would respect, not from bitterness, but from discipline, and from knowing what you're worth without needing applause. This technique will shake your emotional world and flip the script. It's not cute. It's not mainstream. It's banned for a reason, because it works too well. It awakens something primal in the human psyche. It turns your silence into their obsession. You'll stop chasing and start attracting. Not by being louder, but by withdrawing your light so they finally feel what life is like in the dark without it. And no, it's not easy. Your ego will scream. Your fear will whisper, "But what if they forget me?" But your highest self, the stoic within, knows your worth doesn't live in their response. It lives in your restraint. By the end of this video, you won't just understand how silence works. You'll embody it. You'll feel it in your bones. Because the person who can stay silent without shrinking, without panicking, is the one who leaves the deepest mark. Not just in memory, but in desire. And we're about to unravel every layer. From why silence messes with the mind, to how to use it with precision, to the exact moment they break and come crawling back. Each section builds on the last, each moment turning up the emotional volume. So stay with me. Don't blink. Because once you hear what's next, you'll never look at silence, or power, the same way again. 1. Why silence is more addictive than words. Imagine this, you stop texting. Not because you're angry, not because you're trying to punish them. You simply stop. You let the air breathe. You let the space expand. And something curious happens. They begin to think about you. Not just casually, deeply, compulsively. Their mind loops back to you like a melody unresolved. Not because you said something impactful, but because you said nothing at all. Why does that happen? Why is silence, when delivered with intention and calm, more addictive than any message, voice note, or heart-spilled paragraph? The answer isn't romantic. It's neurological. The brain is built to seek closure. It wants to close loops. It wants to understand. That's why cliffhangers work in stories. That's why unanswered texts trigger so much discomfort. When a person is used to your presence, your rhythm, your emotional availability, and then it suddenly stops, they don't experience peace. They experience chaos. Not outwardly, no. Outwardly they may appear composed, even distant. But inside, their nervous system starts firing. The loop has been broken, and now the mind demands resolution. But here's the paradox. They can't get it. And that gap between what they want and what they can have, that's the birth of obsession. Most people don't realize how dangerous predictability is in relationships. Predictability sounds kind. It sounds loyal. But in excess, it dulls emotional tension. It makes your energy feel like background noise, always there, always assumed. And yet, when something always present vanishes without explanation, it doesn't disappear quietly. It echoes. That echo grows in the silence. And that silence, when not born from anger but from composure, becomes magnetic. Let me ask you this. When was the last time someone's absence made you question everything? Their silence made you wonder if you said something wrong, or if they found someone else, or if they simply stopped caring. The uncertainty became the addiction, not the person. The lack of closure did more to fuel your attachment than any compliment or romantic gesture ever could. That's not dysfunction. That's the brain working as designed. In a world of constant stimulation and overcommunication, silence feels violent. It disrupts the norm. And disruption is what the psyche fixates on. Here's where Stoicism enters the conversation. Because true silence, the kind that doesn't scream, "I'm doing this to get a reaction," but whispers, "I am rooted in my self-worth," that silence can only come from emotional discipline. It can only be practiced by someone who no longer needs the other person's validation to feel whole. That's Stoic relationships in action. Not coldness. Not games. Just self-command. You are no longer performing for attention. You are choosing presence or absence with awareness. You are no longer a reaction. You are a decision. Now let's speak plainly. Silence isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. If it's used recklessly, it becomes manipulation. But when it's done with clean energy, with no intent to hurt, no desire to confuse, then it becomes something entirely different. It becomes a mirror. And people who are used to controlling the emotional temperature of a relationship cannot handle a mirror. Because it shows them exactly what they've been giving. Or what they've failed to give. You've probably been there before. You've probably sent the long message. The emotional paragraph. You poured out your heart hoping they'd finally understand. And maybe they responded. Maybe they didn't. But did anything really change? Did they come closer, or did they just know more about what you felt? Now contrast that with the time you went silent, not out of strategy, but because you were simply tired. No explanations. No drama. Just distance. And suddenly, they noticed. They asked. They reached. They became the one who felt the absence instead of assuming the presence. The most haunting energy in any human connection is not, "I hate you." It's, "I've outgrown needing to explain myself to you." It's when you're no longer seeking to be understood by someone who has made no effort to understand you. That's when the tables turn. That's when your presence becomes precious again. And it's in that space, between what they used to receive freely and what they now miss, that addiction forms. Let's step deeper. The person who can master this kind of silence has to first master themselves. Because this isn't about waiting for someone to notice you're gone. It's about learning to be fully okay even if they don't. That's the stoicism behind the silence. You don't collapse when they don't chase. You don't spiral when they don't ask why. You don't seek comfort in their confusion. You simply keep walking. And the further you walk in stillness, the louder your absence gets. You become the question they can't answer. You become the scene that didn't get closure. You become the voice that used to fill the silence, and now the silence is all they hear. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. This is how Stoic relationships are built, not by over-explaining, not by performing loyalty, but by honoring your value in the quietest way possible. And what does that look like in real life? It means you stop over-functioning. You stop initiating every conversation. You stop overgiving to make up for their emotional laziness. You stop filling in every gap with softness, hoping they'll appreciate you more. You simply stop. Not from resentment. From realization that your energy is currency, and you've been spending it where it's not reciprocated. The human brain attaches to what it doesn't understand. It obsesses over what slips away too soon. This is why silence, delivered without resentment, becomes so powerful. Because it creates ambiguity. And ambiguity invites fascination, curiosity, emotional pursuit. This doesn't mean you'll be loved more for being unavailable. It means you'll be respected more for being disciplined with your availability. That's the core of Stoicism, mastering your responses, choosing your engagement, and never being emotionally held hostage by someone else's inconsistency. The next time someone begins to pull away, ask yourself, what would happen if I didn't chase? If I didn't explain? If I didn't shrink just to maintain closeness? What would happen if I simply let silence speak for me? That silence won't be empty. It will be full of your power, your restraint, your quiet refusal to beg for breadcrumbs. And that fullness will be felt deeply, even if they don't say it, even if their pride holds them back. Because no one forgets the person who stopped trying, but never stopped glowing. Let's be clear, silence isn't about vanishing. It's about presence without participation. You're still here. You still care. But you're no longer pouring into a void. You've redirected your energy inward, toward healing, toward strength, toward becoming a person who no longer fears being misunderstood because they've chosen to understand themselves. You don't need to say, I'm pulling away. You don't need to justify your distance. That's the old pattern, seeking to be seen. The new pattern? Letting absence do the talking. Letting your withdrawal become the wake-up call. And if they miss you, truly miss you, they will come back. Not just to reconnect, but to reckon with the silence they created. And the silence you finally let them feel. That is the true Stoic power. Not silence as punishment, but silence as proof that your value was never in your voice. It was in your energy. And when that energy stops flowing towards someone, it creates an emotional drought they never saw coming. 2. Emotional contrast, the heart of desire. Desire isn't born in peace. It's born in disruption. In that gap between what was and what is now. An emotional contrast, this sudden shift from closeness to stillness, from warmth to distance, is the most potent form of that disruption. It's the psychological jolt that makes someone stop in their tracks and think, wait, what just happened? You see, we're conditioned to believe that consistency is the most attractive quality. Be steady. Be loyal. Be present. But here's the paradox. Too much consistency becomes emotional white noise. It becomes routine. And routine breeds complacency. That's where emotional contrast becomes not just useful, but necessary. Think of the last time you truly missed someone. Was it because they were always there, always replying, always predictable? Or was it because something changed? Because one day their tone shifted, their text slowed, their energy pulled back, and suddenly you couldn't stop thinking about them? That right there is the essence of emotional contrast. And the power it carries is immense. Not because it manipulates, but because it reveals. It reveals how much they value you when you're no longer emotionally chasing. It reveals whether they ever truly appreciated your presence, or simply assumed it. Let me speak plainly, emotional contrast is not punishment. It is presence in a new form. It is your energy taking on a different shape, one that reflects your evolving standards. In Stoic relationships, contrast is not about revenge. It's about recalibration. When someone grows too used to your warmth, your kindness, your daily attention, the most powerful thing you can offer isn't another message, another compliment, another attempt to be understood. It's space. Calm, intentional space. And that space becomes the silence they never thought they'd have to sit with. Ask yourself, what happens when you go from daily texts to nothing? From checking in, asking questions, showing care, to complete stillness? Their nervous system registers it like a power outage. They were used to the light. Now they're in the dark. And in that darkness, their mind starts to spiral. Not because you're gone, but because they never noticed how much they relied on your energy until it disappeared. This is the core of Stoicism, not reacting, not trying to win, but allowing reality to do the heavy lifting. You're no longer teaching them with words. You're teaching them with your absence. There's a reason mystery is so attractive. It activates the brain's reward system. When we don't know what's coming next, our attention sharpens. We become alert. That's why slot machines are addictive, not because you win every time, but because you don't. That uncertainty creates emotional tension. And emotional tension creates engagement. In Stoic relationships, this is not about hot and cold games. It's about preserving polarity, the electric charge that keeps attraction alive. Polarity needs space. It needs the dance of closeness and distance. Too much closeness, and you become emotionally fused. Too much distance, and the bond breaks. The art is in the shift. So how do you create emotional contrast without becoming cruel? By choosing your moments wisely. You don't pull away after a fight. You don't go silent out of spite. You pull back right after something beautiful. After a deep conversation. After a vulnerable exchange. After a moment that touched both of you. Why? Because that's when the shift hits hardest. It's not expected. It's not logical. And that illogical shift is what drives them into reflection. One moment you were glowing with them. The next, you're unreachable. Not blocked. Not gone. Just still. And that stillness makes their heart race. Not because they're hurt, but because they miss you in a way they can't explain. Let's look at this from a Stoic lens. In the ancient world, control over one's emotions was not suppression, it was sovereignty. It was knowing when to speak, when to act, and when to withdraw. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Emotional contrast is not chaos. It is controlled intensity. You are not punishing. You are reflecting. And that reflection forces them to confront a truth they might have avoided, that your presence was never guaranteed. That your energy is not on autopilot. That your affection, once assumed, now must be earned. Most people respond to emotional distance by trying harder. They write longer texts. They beg for clarity. They ask, "What changed?" But the Stoic approach is the opposite. You don't give them an explanation. You give them the experience of your absence. Because words won't teach what silence can. Let them feel the shift. Let them sit in the echo of what was once constant. That's when the mind begins to remember replay and, yes, regret. And it's not just about creating a reaction. It's about recalibrating the dynamic. Because when you stop giving endlessly, they're forced to ask, "Did I lose something real?" And the answer, unspoken but felt, is yes. They lost your consistent glow. They lost your warmth. They lost the version of you that overfunctioned to keep the connection alive. And in that loss, they begin to crave. That's not manipulation. That's natural consequence. And sometimes, natural consequence is the only thing strong enough to spark change. Now imagine this playing out over days. You haven't messaged. You haven't posted. You haven't reacted. And they begin to check. First out of curiosity. Then out of concern. Then out of longing. They read old texts. They remember moments. They look for signs that you're still there, still soft, still catchable. But all they find is silence. Not the cold kind. The confident kind. The kind that makes them say, "What did I do?" That is emotional contrast working. That is their own mind doing the work you used to do for them. And if they come back, which they often do, it's not because you reminded them. It's because you didn't. And that absence, that vacuum, became louder than any pleading could ever be. The only way to make someone miss you deeply is to stop showing up in the same predictable way. You don't need to vanish. You don't need to ghost. You just shift. You let your emotional tone evolve. You go from warm to neutral. From initiating to pausing. From available to observing. And in that shift, everything changes. Let me leave you with this. Contrast is not manipulation. It is revelation. It reveals who values you and who only values what you give. It reveals who steps up when the energy shifts, and who disappears. It reveals whether they were ever emotionally invested, or simply comfortable. And for those who are comfortable with your consistency, this shift can be jarring. But it's also honest. Because love that only functions when you overextend isn't love. It's dependency. And contrast is how you expose that truth. You're not asking to be chased. You're asking to be seen. You're not playing hard to get. You're reclaiming the energy that was once scattered. And when they finally feel it, deep in their chest, in that strange place between memory and longing, they'll realize they weren't addicted to your words. They were addicted to your energy. And now that it's gone, they can't stop wondering if they'll ever feel it again. So if this is hitting home, if you're already feeling the shift, already seeing the effects, then you know what to do. Like this video if it's speaking to something inside you. And drop, number 1, in the comments right now if you're starting to see the power of emotional contrast. Subscribe for more insights into Stoicism, Stoic relationships, and how silence can be your strongest message yet. The journey is just beginning. Let's keep going. 3. The mirror void effect. Let them sit with themselves. It begins quietly. You don't change your number. You don't make a scene. You don't announce your departure. You simply shift your energy, like a tide pulling away from the shore, and they're left wondering where the warmth went. That's the mirror void effect. It isn't about disappearance. It's about reflection. It's about becoming a mirror so exact, so still, that the only thing they can see is themselves. Their choices. Their distance. Their silence, now staring back at them. In Stoic relationships, you do not retaliate emotionally. You don't seek revenge or attempt to balance emotional scales through manipulation. You observe, you absorb, and then you respond with detachment. The mirror void effect is that detachment in motion. When they stop calling, you stop hoping. When they ignore your energy, you stop projecting it. When they breadcrumb you with just enough affection to keep you attached, you remove the loaf entirely. You don't fill the space. You become it. And in doing so, they feel what they never expected to feel, your absence, multiplied by their own neglect. Ask yourself, how many times have you forgiven without apology? Showed up even when they didn't? Poured love into silence, hoping it would echo back someday? The mirror void effect is what happens when you stop begging the silence to change, and instead, you let it speak for itself. You let them feel the weight of your energy no longer there, not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of sovereignty. You become a reflection of their own effort, their own consistency, their own commitment, or lack thereof. And here's the paradox. They will not notice this shift immediately. At first, they might believe you've simply moved on. Or worse, that you're unaffected. But the mind is never fooled for long. As days pass and your energy remains consistent in its absence, something begins to stir inside them. It's not panic. Not yet. It's awareness. Awareness that something valuable was there, and now it's gone. Awareness that their emotional laziness, once met with your forgiveness, is now being met with a silence too steady to be accidental. And that awareness triggers something deeper, regret. People often expect noise. They expect drama. They expect a plea, a question, a final goodbye. But when you give them none of that, when you retreat with grace and presence, they're left staring into a mirror. That mirror doesn't accuse. It doesn't explain. It just shows them what they are, who they've been, and what they've lost. And this is where Stoicism reveals its sharpest edge. Because you didn't flinch. You didn't chase. You didn't cry for their attention. You simply became still. And in your stillness, their conscience awakened. You see, most people don't change when you beg them to. They change when they're forced to face themselves. When they have no one left to project onto. When the room goes quiet and all that's left are the echoes of their own behavior. That's what the void does. It echoes. And the echo gets louder the longer you stay silent. There's a line in Stoic philosophy that says, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." But in relationships, the opposite often happens. We become tolerant to the point of erosion. We allow repeated disregard. We shrink so they can feel big. We speak more, hoping they'll finally hear us. But the mirror void flips that script. You are no longer the one over-functioning. You are no longer the interpreter of silence, the explainer of emotions, the bridge to understanding. You become the observer. The mirror. The quiet absence that doesn't seek to teach, but inevitably teaches everything. Let's look at what happens psychologically. When someone is used to getting a reaction from you, your reaction becomes their proof of control. Whether it's a smile, a reply, or even anger. It confirms their place in your world. But the moment you stop reacting, that certainty collapses. They don't know where they stand. And the human mind cannot bear uncertainty for long. It needs resolution. It needs answers. But you've taken the answers away, not as revenge, but as release. Now they sit in their own questions, repeating patterns in their mind. Did I do something wrong? Why isn't she checking on me? Did she move on? Is she done for real? And those questions spiral. Because the void doesn't lie. The void is honest. The void says, I'm no longer explaining my worth. I'm no longer proving my place. I'm no longer speaking where I was not being heard. In this way, the mirror void becomes more powerful than any confrontation. Because it doesn't escalate tension, it dissolves it. Not with fire, but with disappearance. And disappearance, when calm and unannounced, becomes unforgettable. This is not about making someone feel pain. This is about giving them space to feel their own. That's what Stoicism teaches us. Not to inflict suffering, but to withdraw from codependency. To separate our worth from their validation. And to sit, yes, even in loneliness, with our dignity intact. Because your silence, when born from clarity, becomes a boundary no one can cross. Not even them. You may wonder, will they come back? Will they notice what they've lost? The answer is often yes. But more important than that is this: will you be the same person if they do? Or will the silence have changed you? Will the mirror have shown you something too? That your peace is louder than their approval. That your emotional energy, when reserved, becomes sacred. That the real power lies not in their return, but in your ability to stay gone if nothing has changed. You are not disappearing. You are declaring. Quietly. Elegantly. Powerfully. And they will feel it. Maybe not on day 1. Maybe not on day 7. But eventually, they will feel the ache of losing access to the version of you that never stopped giving. And that ache? That's not your burden anymore. That's their mirror. And it only reflects what they've given. Or what they've failed to give. Remember, the mirror void is not a tactic. It's a transformation. You are not the same person you were when you started. You no longer seek closure. You no longer need to be understood by someone who stopped listening. You no longer bend your energy just to keep a bond. You've become something else, something calmer, something more grounded, something more stoic. And here's the deepest truth: when you become the mirror, not everyone will like what they see. Some will retreat. Some will lash out. Some will pretend you never mattered. But some, perhaps the ones who truly needed to grow, will feel it in their core. And they won't know how to explain it. Because it wasn't a fight. It wasn't a message. It was a void. A void that looked exactly like them. And now, the silence they once gave you, is the silence they can't escape. That is the heart of the mirror void effect. No anger. No revenge. Just you, holding your energy like something precious. And in doing so, becoming the lesson they never saw coming. 4. Controlled silence. Power without words. There's silence, and then there's controlled silence. The first is what most people know, an emotional shutdown, an accidental pause, the space that happens when two people drift. But controlled silence? That's something different. That's an art. A choice. A shift in energy so calm, so deliberate, it echoes louder than words ever could. Controlled silence isn't passive. It's active restraint. And in the realm of Stoic relationships, It's one of the most powerful demonstrations of self-respect you'll ever offer someone who once took your presence for granted. Picture this: you stop showing up the way you used to. Not out of anger, but from clarity. You're not punishing them. You're not giving them the cold shoulder. You're simply done investing where there's no return. You stop liking their posts. You stop checking who watched your stories. You stop responding to breadcrumbs. You stop initiating conversations that lead nowhere. And you do it all with quiet, composed grace. That's controlled silence. It doesn't ask, "Did you notice I'm gone?" It says, "I know my worth now. I no longer offer it for free." And what does that do to them? It short-circuits their expectations. You see, people learn your patterns. They know you'll reach out. They count on it. They assume that no matter what distance they create, you'll bridge it. But when you break that pattern, not with a tantrum, but with tranquility, they don't know what to do. Their control over the emotional rhythm breaks. Their certainty evaporates. And in its place, tension begins. Emotional, psychological, subconscious tension. It builds in silence. And when silence builds without chaos, it becomes deafening. Controlled silence isn't about timing. It's about discipline. The discipline to pause when your instinct is to fix. The strength to be still when your fear begs you to chase. It's the internal command to wait, not for them to reach out, but for your own sense of emotional balance to return. It's the silence that says, "I am no longer performing for connection. I am no longer trying to explain why I'm worth staying for." And that, more than any dramatic exit or well-worded message, creates impact. This kind of silence isn't cold. It's warm, in a distant way. Like the sun behind clouds. Present, but not accessible. It doesn't block. It doesn't burn bridges. It doesn't ghost. It simply redirects energy inward. You're still here, but you're here for you now. And that shift is deeply unsettling for someone who's used to you giving endlessly. Because now, their subconscious begins to panic. Not immediately, no. At first, they rationalize it. Maybe they're just busy. Maybe they're taking space. But day after day, as your silence holds, their logic unravels. Because now there's no pattern to follow. No reaction to depend on. Just the gap you used to fill with effort. Stoicism teaches us that power lies in control over impulse. That means not saying something just because you feel it. Not acting just because you're uncomfortable. In Stoic Relationships, controlled silence is the manifestation of that lesson. You feel the urge to text, but you pause. You feel the ache to explain, but you choose stillness. Not because you're suppressing emotion, but because you are now led by purpose, not pain. Because the version of you who explains, overfunctions, and fixes, she doesn't live here anymore. And let's be real, it's not easy. Controlled silence is not for the faint-hearted. It will test every part of you that wants to be seen, heard, validated. But here's the alchemy. The moment you stop chasing is the moment they start noticing. And the longer you hold your silence with steadiness, not sulking, not strategizing, just being, the more their discomfort grows. They begin to remember things. Your voice. Your laughter. The comfort of your presence. The safety of your attention. And they begin to wonder, did I lose her? Is she done? Does she even miss me? That wondering is where the emotional shift begins. Because now they're the one with questions. Now they're the one rereading texts, checking your online activity, trying to feel connected to the version of you that no longer makes herself available. And this isn't petty. It's not manipulation. It's feedback. Your silence is not revenge. It's reflection. It shows them exactly what they gave. Or failed to give. And that's the moment where realization hits, not with words, but with tension. Let's dig deeper. Controlled silence also allows you to see more clearly. It creates the emotional distance you need to assess their actions objectively. Because when you're constantly engaged, you're constantly reacting. You're too close to see clearly. But in silence, your vision sharpens. You begin to see what was real, what was habit, what was hope. And you begin to return to yourself, not just emotionally, but spiritually. That's the quiet power of Stoicism. It doesn't demand a dramatic exit. It simply stops explaining. And when they feel the change, when they sense your detachment, not because you've moved on to someone else, but because you've moved deeper into your own self-worth, that's when the fear begins. Fear that they've been replaced. Fear that you're healing without them. Fear that you were never as attached as they assumed. Because they expected chaos. They expected a breakdown. But you gave them grace. You gave them stillness. You gave them the slow, deliberate silence that says, "You are no longer the center of my world." And that kind of energy is unforgettable. Because it doesn't just create distance, it creates space. Space for them to feel, question, reflect. And if there's anything real inside of them, that space will ignite it. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But silence always works its way into the soul. It leaves no debris, no argument, no scene. Just stillness. And that stillness becomes a message they can't ignore. Now here's the final truth. When they do reach out, and most of them do, you won't be the same. You'll feel different. Stronger. Calmer. Less reactive. Because you didn't wait in fear. You waited in power. And now you choose, not from desperation, but from discernment. Do they truly see you now? Or are they just uncomfortable with the void you created? That's the question you'll be able to answer, not because you got a message, but because you gave yourself silence long enough to see the answer clearly. And that's why controlled silence is banned. Not because it's cruel, but because it's too effective. Because it rewires the emotional dynamic. Because it teaches both people what words never could. And because once you use it, once you feel its power, you'll never chase again. So if this part of the video is hitting home, if you're already feeling the calm that comes from emotional command, then go ahead and show it. Like this video and drop, number 1, in the comments if you know this kind of silence is the transformation you've been needing. And don't forget to subscribe, because in the next section, we go even deeper into how contrast and unpredictability work together to make you unforgettable. You're doing more than learning here. You're becoming someone they'll never get over. Let's keep going. 5. Subtle energy shifts the silent alarm. There's a certain kind of power that doesn't arrive with noise or exit with explanation. It enters like a whisper, leaves like a chill, and lingers like a question. That power lives in subtle shifts, in the micro adjustments to your energy, tone, and presence that communicate everything without saying a word. And when it's done with clarity and composure, it becomes a silent alarm. One they feel in their gut, even if they can't explain why. It's not silence. It's the precursor to silence. And sometimes, it hits even harder. Let's break it down. You don't vanish. You don't stop talking. You don't go cold. You just start adjusting. Your replies are slightly slower. Not cold, but no longer eager. You still smile, but your smile fades faster. You listen, but you don't lean in like you used to. You let the conversation sit in silence instead of rushing to fill the gap. You pull back your energy, not your words, not your presence, but your emotional investment. And suddenly, they're unsettled. They can't name it, but they feel it. That's the alarm. That's the shift. The reason it works is simple. Humans are wired to notice change, especially changes in patterns. When someone's energy shifts subtly, the brain picks it up faster than the conscious mind can understand. It's a survival mechanism. The nervous system becomes alert. What's different? What's wrong? And that alertness becomes fixation, especially in relationships. Especially when they're used to you being a certain way. In Stoic Relationships, this tactic isn't a game. It's a mirror. When someone begins to take your affection for granted, or assume your energy will always be there no matter how they show up, subtle shifts create contrast without confrontation. They offer feedback without words. It's not punishment. It's reflection. And when used from a grounded place, it becomes an awakening. Here's what that looks like. You still say good morning, but you don't ask about their plans for the day. You still answer the phone, but your tone is composed, not enthusiastic. You used to initiate long messages. Now your replies are brief but kind. You're still there, but they feel like something's missing. Because something is missing, your full availability, your unchecked warmth, your instinct to overextend. And that missing piece becomes their obsession. Not because you were dramatic, but because you were subtle. These micro shifts are more sustainable than silence. They let you hold your power without going to extremes. And sometimes, they're even more powerful, because they keep you in the room while still creating distance. That's when the dynamic begins to reverse. They lean in. They try harder. They try to get you back, even though you never left. Because they're not missing your presence, they're missing your energy. And that's when they realize the thing they thought they'd always have is slipping through their fingers. Not fast. Not loud. Just enough to make them ache. Think of a candle. You don't blow it out. You just lower the flame. And in the dim light, everything becomes more intense. More focused. That's what these shifts do. They don't remove you. They magnify you. Because now, every look, every word, every pause feels like a message. And that message is simple. I'm no longer giving freely what you didn't protect. That's the Stoic mindset in motion. No drama. No revenge. Just a quiet return to your own emotional center. And here's what makes it even more powerful. These shifts aren't declared. You don't explain them. You don't post about them. You don't say, I'm pulling back. You just do it. And when they ask if something's wrong, you answer with grace. No, I'm good. Not cold. Just calm. And that calmness becomes the contrast. Because they expected you to seek reassurance. To need clarity. But instead, you're self-contained. And that kind of self-containment? That's magnetic. Because it signals something rare, emotional security. When they don't know exactly what changed, they start trying to figure it out. They replay conversations. They check your tone. They scan your body language. And all of it leads to one conclusion. I'm losing something, but I don't know what. That tension creates urgency. Urgency creates desire. And desire leads to pursuit. But here's the key, you're no longer chasing. You're not waiting for their validation. You're simply observing. You're watching how they respond to the new version of you, the version that no longer performs emotional labor uninvited. In Stoicism, power lies in restraint. And subtle energy shifts are the most elegant form of restraint. You're not reacting emotionally. You're responding spiritually. You're not withholding love, you're adjusting your output based on how it's received. And that discernment? That's wisdom. It's maturity. It's what makes them pause and say, she feels different. Even if they can't explain why. You're not becoming unavailable. You're becoming selective. You're not playing hard to get. You're valuing your own emotional currency. And when someone realizes that your warmth is no longer guaranteed, they begin to chase, not because you manipulated them, but because you revealed what they had. And the fear of losing that revelation creates a hunger they can't quiet. That hunger isn't for your body. It's for your energy, your attention, your emotional presence. That's the mark of true attraction. And if they don't notice, if they don't adjust, that silence speaks volumes too. Because now you're seeing them clearly. You're seeing who shows up when you stop carrying the entire connection. You're seeing who values you beyond what you offer. And that clarity? That's a gift. Because now your choices are rooted in truth, not fantasy. In reality, not potential. You no longer need to guess. You can simply see. The power of subtle shifts is that they give you back your rhythm. They allow you to lead with grace instead of fear. They give you space to decide, not from panic, but from peace. And most of all, they create space for them to meet you in the middle, or fall away without drama. Either way you win. Because you stayed grounded. You stayed honest. You stayed in control of your energy. In a world of emotional chaos, subtlety becomes a weapon. Not to harm, but to protect. Not to confuse, but to clarify. And once you've learned to adjust your energy like this, lightly, cleanly, intentionally, you'll never go back to overgiving. You'll never go back to explaining your worth. Because you'll see how quickly people notice the difference. Not when you speak, but when you stop glowing for those who dimmed you. This is the heart of Stoic relationships, not silence born of suppression, but shifts born of self-respect. Not detachment to avoid pain, but detachment to observe truth. And as you embody this more and more, your life changes. Your dynamics shift. And suddenly, you're no longer the one who worries about being left. You're the one who decides who stays. Let that truth sink in. Let it guide your next interaction. Let it remind you that your energy is never invisible, it's just often undervalued until it changes form. And when you control that form with intention, you don't need to ask for respect. You command it quietly. 6. When they break the silence first, and they will. You've done the work. You've held the silence. You've adjusted your energy, redirected your attention, reclaimed your peace. And now it happens. The moment that proves everything you've been learning was never in vain. They reach out. Slowly at first. A simple message. A soft check-in. An excuse cloaked in nostalgia. Hey, remember that place we used to go? Or maybe just, hope you're doing okay. And suddenly, everything shifts. The silence is broken, but not by you. And that changes everything. Let's be clear, this moment is not an accident. It's the direct result of your emotional discipline. They've been thinking about you, replaying moments in their head, scrolling through your old texts, wondering where your energy went and why it feels so cold now. They tried to pretend they didn't notice. They tried to fill the space with distractions. But silence doesn't leave quietly. It lingers. It builds tension. And tension needs release. That release comes in the form of a message. Maybe awkward. Maybe subtle. But it comes. Because they can no longer tolerate the space they created. And now you're at a crossroads. Not one where you must choose between reply or ignore. But one where your response will determine whether you stay in your power or give it away. Because the temptation is real. To melt. To return to the old dynamic. To take their message as a green light to start pouring again. But if you've come this far, you already know that response is no longer who you are. What matters now is your rhythm. Your restraint. Your ability to slow the moment down. Not to punish, but to preserve your energy. This is where Stoicism meets romance. You're not reacting emotionally. You're responding consciously. Because now, their words are not enough. Their curiosity isn't a confession. Their message isn't a full return. It's a test of your silence, your growth, your new self-awareness. How you answer reveals not just your interest, but your evolution. They want to know if you still feel the same. If the door is still open. If the version of you they remember is still standing by. But here's the thing, you've changed. The silence didn't just affect them. It rebuilt you. You've become someone who doesn't need to be chosen. Someone who doesn't perform love to stay relevant. Someone who doesn't collapse into old patterns just because someone remembered how good your energy felt. And now it's their turn. To prove. To show. To earn back the warmth they once assumed. Because your silence wasn't empty. It was loaded with meaning, memory, and unspoken messages. Messages they now want to decode. Why did she stop? Did she really move on? Is she over me? Those aren't just questions. They're beginnings. The start of them realizing that your energy wasn't theirs to take. It was theirs to value, and they didn't. Most people assume the person who breaks silence wins. But in Stoic relationships, it's the person who breaks their own ego that truly changes the game. When they come back, you'll know the silence has worked. But that doesn't mean your job is done. Because now the real test begins. Will you slip back into comfort? Or will you hold your new standard? This doesn't mean you reject them coldly. Stoicism isn't bitterness. It's clarity. If they come back with sincerity, with depth, with changed behavior, you can meet them. Gently. Slowly. On your terms. But if they come back with confusion, with passivity, with the same patterns, your silence must remain. Because silence isn't just what got their attention. It's what protected your peace. And peace is now your priority. This is the moment where many undo all their progress. They mistake the first message for a grand gesture. They pour again. They soften too quickly. They answer with the energy of someone who never stopped waiting. But you weren't waiting. You were evolving. You were remembering who you were before you overfunctioned in the name of love. And now that they're reaching out, they need to feel that. Not through punishment. Through your presence. Your presence now is quieter. Stronger. More grounded. You respond, but not immediately. You're kind, but not eager. You're open, but not available on demand. And in doing so, you teach something they never expected to learn, that your energy has boundaries now. That your light doesn't shine for just anyone anymore. That your silence wasn't weakness, it was your awakening. And here's the beauty of it, they will feel all of this. Every pause in your response. Every shift in your tone. Every withheld explanation. Every moment you let the silence stretch instead of rushing to fill it. It all says one thing. You no longer have access to the version of me you remember. That doesn't mean you hate them. It means you've changed. And now, if they want to return, it has to be different. It has to be real. Let them feel the silence they once gave you. Not out of revenge, but out of balance. Let them earn the softness they once expected. Not out of pride, but out of respect. Let them sit in the tension. Let them remember how it felt to be loved by you. Because now, the only way back to your heart is through consistent action, not words. Through emotional clarity, not vague nostalgia. Through real presence, not temporary curiosity. And if they can't meet you there, if their message is just a flicker, not a flame, you don't chase the light. You stay in your glow. You continue in your silence. Because silence wasn't a phase. It became your baseline. Your new home. Your sanctuary. And you protect it now, not because you fear love, but because you finally understand that love without respect isn't love. It's noise. And you've learned to live without noise. So when they break the silence first, remember this, they're not reaching out to fix you. They're reaching out because you no longer make them feel safe in your energy. That safety is now something they have to earn. And that earning begins with consistency, clarity, vulnerability. If they come back with those things, you'll know. If they don't, your silence will speak for you. Again. And they'll hear it louder this time. Because now, they know what your silence really means. It means boundaries. It means power. It means stoicism in motion, not as coldness, but as self-worth. You didn't disappear. You ascended. You didn't play hard to get. You became hard to forget. And that's the lesson they'll carry whether they return fully, or fade back into the silence they once chose for themselves. So if you've made it this far, and you've felt every word down to your core, then let it land. Let it change the way you engage, the way you respond, the way you choose who gets your softness again. And if this part of the journey hits something deep inside you, then like this video and comment, number 1, to claim the energy you've just stepped into. And subscribe, because there's more. Much more. You're not just watching this. You're becoming someone they'll never get over. The next step is closer than you think. Let's keep moving. So now you understand. Silence is not simply the absence of noise. It is the presence of power. It is not emptiness, but space. Not manipulation, but mastery. You've walked through the terrain of emotional contrast, of the mirror void effect, of controlled silence and subtle shifts. And now, at the edge of this journey, you stand facing the question that lingers in every heart that dares to choose stillness over chasing. What now? The truth is, the silence you've practiced has already done its work, not just on them, but on you. It carved out room inside your spirit where noise once lived. It forced you to look at the parts of yourself that needed constant validation and taught you to sit with them. It taught you the Stoic truth that nothing outside yourself can disturb your peace unless you let it. And in that revelation you grew. You softened into strength. You began to see that your energy is sacred. That not everyone deserves access. That not everyone who desires your light is prepared to stand in it. This isn't a trick. It's a transformation. It's not a temporary method to win someone back. It's a permanent shift in how you relate, to yourself, and to others. The kind of silence you've embraced is no longer about them at all. It's about you. It's about becoming someone who doesn't need to raise their voice to be heard. Who doesn't need to overextend to be loved. Who doesn't need to stay in the room just because they were once invited in. You now walk away not with bitterness, but with clarity. And that clarity, more than any confession, becomes your shield. You see, silence doesn't just say, "I'm not talking." It says, "I no longer negotiate my value." It's not a void, it's a choice. A posture. An energy. And it only gets louder the calmer it becomes. In Stoicism, we are taught that control over one's emotions is the truest form of strength. Not suppression. Not denial. But the ability to respond instead of react. To choose composure when chaos is offered. To lead ourselves when the world tempts us to lose our footing. You've done that here. And it has changed you. They may come back. They may not. But the most powerful part is this: you no longer need them to. Because what you wanted from them, connection, respect, presence, you've started giving to yourself. That's what Stoic relationships require. Not coldness, but integrity. Not distance, but direction. The silence you created was not absence, it was alignment. It was you coming home to yourself. And in that home, there is peace. A peace that no message, no apology, no reunion can offer. Because it lives within you now. This silence, if you've followed it honestly, has made you harder to reach, but not because you've become distant. Because you've become rare. It has made you more magnetic, not because you're unavailable, but because you're intentional. It has made you unforgettable. Not because you said the right thing, but because you stopped speaking where you were being unheard. This is not the silence of defeat. It's the silence of resolve. And now, moving forward, everything changes. You don't show up with open hands for someone who dropped what you gave them. You don't chase comfort at the cost of your dignity. You don't perform softness in hopes of being remembered. You move with purpose. You engage with presence. You love with eyes wide open. And when someone can't meet that, you don't scream. You don't fight. You don't explain. You simply fall silent. And your silence becomes the final lesson. So many people walk around making noise to prove they matter. But you, after this, will never need to again. Your presence, when grounded in restraint, becomes louder than any voice. Your withdrawal, when born of wisdom, becomes a presence they feel in their bones. And your stillness, when delivered with elegance, becomes the storm they never saw coming. This is what it means to practice emotional sovereignty. To hold your heart without squeezing it into someone else's timeline. To honor your intuition without demanding that others agree. To live in a way that doesn't need to be loud, because it's already powerful. You are not just learning how to be quiet. You are learning how to be heard in silence. And that's why this is the band trick. Not because it's dark, but because it's too effective. Because it reveals too much. It flips the emotional script without saying a word. It breaks their rhythm. It rewrites the ending. And once you've used it, once you've felt it, it becomes a part of you. You'll never return to begging. You'll never collapse under the weight of almost. You'll never need closure again. Because your silence became the final word. That's the transformation. That's the message. That's the power of the dark silence. It's not a game. It's not revenge. It's the quietest kind of love you've ever given to yourself. And now, wherever they are, whether they understand it or not, your absence is speaking. And they are listening. Even if they'll never admit it. This is the silence they'll never forget. And this is the version of you they'll never get again. Stay in your power. Stay in your peace. Your silence has already said enough.